A man walked into the wrong interview. His clothes were muddy, his resume was wrinkled. But they didn't kick him out, because when the CEO saw him, she was taken back years into the past. And in that moment, everything changed. As Marcus Bennett walked through the rain that morning, only two things were on his mind. I need to find a job, and Luna is waiting. Even while his 7-year-old daughter was still asleep in the back seat, her face was crystal clear in his mind. She was curled up inside her brown coat, her tiny body looking like she wanted to hide from the world as she slept. Marcus looked up at the glass tower ahead. He didn't belong here. His boots were muddy, his resume was wrinkled, but he didn't have any other options left. He read the message on his phone again. Janitor interview, 9 a.m., 21st floor. Even that felt like a lot to him. The folder in his hand was only a single page. It was stained with oil, but it was real. It was the summary of his life shaped by oil and responsibility. Before he went back to Luna, he had to give it his best shot. Because this morning, he'd promised her, "I'll knock on every door today." Riding up in the elevator, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that he was in the wrong place. He checked the floor number, but as soon as he walked in, his first thought was that he'd made a mistake. The place didn't look like a waiting room for a janitor position, it was more like a luxury boardroom. The walls were glass, the table was walnut, and there were people in expensive suits everywhere, holding minimalistic tablets. Marcus was about to step back when a young woman with headphones came up to him. "You're here for the EA interview, right?" she asked, without even looking at his file. "Yay? You mean executive assistant?" Marcus hesitated. The woman paused for a second, then said, "Please, have a seat. They'll call you in soon," and pointed him to an empty chair. Marcus sat down, not really wanting to. The man next to him looked him up and down with a smug expression, eyeing his wrinkled shirt. As Marcus tried to straighten his folder, he thought about just leaving, until the door opened. The room went quiet. When the woman walked in, everyone sat up straighter. Her gray suit, her tightly tied hair, she just drew in all the energy in the room. Marcus was almost too nervous to look at her, but she, without glancing at anyone else, looked straight at Marcus. Her eyes seemed to see right through him, like she recognized him. Her lips parted, but she didn't say anything. Then she set her file down, lifted her chin slightly, and said, "Let's start with you." Marcus looked around in surprise. "Me?" The woman nodded. "Yes. Why are you here?" Marcus cleared his throat. "Actually, I think I'm in the wrong room. I applied for the janitor position." There were some light chuckles in the room, but the CEO didn't laugh. "So why did you stay?" she asked. Marcus paused for a moment. "Because I promised my daughter I'd knock on every door." The room went silent again. The CEO took a deep breath. "Interesting. Everyone else is talking about procedures. But you're real." Then she turned to the room and said, "I'll be doing one-on-one interviews now. First, Mr. Bennett." Marcus just froze. "With me?" "Yes," the woman said, without a smile. "Come with me, please." As they walked down the hallway together, Marcus was thinking about his past. Where did he know this woman from? He didn't even know her name. But her eyes reminded him of something from 7 years ago. That dark night, that empty road, and someone sitting on the curb. He hadn't forgotten, but he couldn't quite remember either. When they got to the office, the woman closed the door. Marcus was about to speak, but stopped when he heard her voice. "Do you remember me?" Marcus's heart sped up. "Excuse me. 7 years ago, by the side of the road. It was raining. There was a gas station. You gave me your coat. You didn't ask my name. You just said, 'Don't bring it back. Give it to someone else one day.'" Marcus's mouth dropped open. His eyes went wide. "That was you," he whispered. The woman nodded. "My name is Clara. Clara Weiss. And that night, you saved my life." Marcus felt like the ground was gone beneath his feet. Shock, embarrassment, and a strange warmth ran from his face down to his neck. He hadn't really thought about that night since. But Clara had never forgotten. "Now," Clara said, picking up a folder, "I want to hire you. But not as an executive assistant. This isn't a coincidence, Mr. Bennett. This is a door opening again." Marcus couldn't say anything, but all he could think was, maybe this time, he'd walk through the right door. Clara's words went right through the office walls and hit Marcus straight in the chest. This was so much more than a job interview. It felt like fate was reaching out a hand to Marcus after all these years. But Marcus was still hesitant. "But I don't know how to do this job. Offices, projects, budgets. I'm just a mechanic. I applied for a janitor position. Clara smiled softly. That's exactly why we need you. Marcus looked confused. What do you mean? Clara moved behind her desk, opened a file, and pulled out a few pages. In big letters at the top, it said, Community Support Initiative Winter Program. One code, one life. This is a project we're about to start, Clara said. We're going to deliver help to shelters, aid centers, people living on the streets. But this time, as a company, we won't just provide funding. We'll actually be out there, in the field, making real contact. And I want you to lead it. Marcus shook his head in disbelief. But I'm not a leader. I can barely manage my own life. Clara met his eyes, her voice softening. But you saved my life. And that night, you didn't ask for anything. No thank you, not even my name. You just said one thing. Give it to someone else one day. Well, today is that day. With all the emotions stuck in his throat, Marcus looked down. There was so much to say, but no words seemed enough. He remembered that night Clara sitting under a street lamp, soaking wet, shivering without a coat. Back then, she was just a stranger. But Marcus had seen the silent scream in her eyes. Even then, he was trying to fix something. Maybe people. Now it was his turn. All right, he said at last. But I have one condition. Clara raised her eyebrows. What is it? This can't just be for the company's image. If we're really going to help, we need to actually be out there. Not on billboards. If we say we stand with people, we have to be there. Real, genuine, and quietly. Clara smiled. You can be sure that's exactly what I wanted to hear. Right then, there was a knock at the door. A guy with headphones and a techie look walked in. He had a tablet in his hand and looked anxious. Clara, the system crashed. All the servers on the 5th floor are down. The email logs might be gone. He turned to Marcus and stopped. Sorry, he said. Who were you talking to? Clara replied, clear as day. The head of our new project. The guy's face froze. New? What? Marcus Bennett, head of the Winter Aid Initiative. With a vague nod, the guy left, and Marcus gave Clara a surprised grin. That's the first time anyone's ever looked at me like I was their boss. Clara laughed. This is just the beginning. For the rest of that day, Clara took Marcus to a small room waiting for them downstairs. The table was covered in messy folders and used sticky notes and coffee stains. There was a whiteboard on the wall, still completely blank. Marcus looked around. This place was the heart of something about to be born. Raw. Real. Clara pointed to the board. I want you to lead the first meeting. Marcus laughed. Me? What am I supposed to say? Clara smiled. Whatever you feel. That's what people remember most. That evening, Marcus was late picking up Luna from school, but he felt at peace. Looking into his daughter's eyes, he made her another promise. Dad opened a door today. And this time, there's room behind it for others, too. The first team meeting was tougher than Marcus expected. As he looked around the messy meeting room, he carefully studied the 3 people sitting across from him. Trina, a sharp-eyed, practical mom. She was in charge of logistics, and from the look on her face, it was clear she didn't waste a single minute. Luis on the tech side, but shy, still hadn't found his voice. And Zane, deep lines on his face, eyes carrying the shadow of past mistakes. All 3 had come here as volunteers, but none of them looked at Marcus like he was a leader. Not yet, anyway. Well, then, Marcus sighed. Let's get started. By talking about what isn't working. Luis raised an eyebrow. Everything. Zane crossed his arms. The last 3 leaders either ran off, cried, or left with the donations. Trina rolled her eyes. And one of them tried to cheer us up by reading cloud poems. Lasted 6 days. There was a brief silence in the room. Marcus nodded slightly. All right. No poems. I promise. Even that little joke had an unexpected effect. The corner of Trina's mouth twitched. Luis let out a small laugh. Zane didn't look away, but he didn't leave either. That alone was progress. Look, Marcus said, standing up and moving to the whiteboard. I'm not an office guy. I can't code. I can't balance a budget. But I know what it's like to be out in the cold. Hunger, fear, hopelessness. I've been there. Now, for the hundreds of people living in this city, we need to be their voice. But first we need to walk beside them. He wrote one word on the board in big letters. Trust. People won't trust us. They'll trust how they feel. That's why we're not doing flashy presentations. We're just going to reach out a hand. Luis kind of raised his hand. But where are the coats going to come from? No sponsors, no budget. Trina added sharply. We're barely hanging on as it is. Should we hand out blankets with heart-shaped stickers? Marcus stepped closer. Maybe we should start by finding the people who already know who needs help. The ones who help but stay out of sight. Zane lowered his head a little. I know someone. Old soldier. Turned his retired bus into a kitchen. Every night, he hands out soup to people with nowhere to go. No ads. No cameras. He's just there. Marcus's eyes lit up. Let's meet him. Maybe he'd want to work with us. Trina uncrossed her arms. I know someone too. A barber who works alone. He gives free haircuts to people coming out of the shelter. Says, one haircut, one bit of confidence. Marcus immediately wrote the names on the board. The letters were a little crooked, but his passion was steady. Perfect. We're not building something new. We're connecting what's already there. That evening, the four of them squeezed into Trina's nearly falling apart minivan. There was a plush dinosaur in the back seat, and the check engine light was always flashing on the dashboard. But nobody complained. This was their headquarters. First stop was the Old Soldier Hank's food truck. It was a school bus, painted in faded camo, turned into a soup kitchen. Marcus walked up and held out his hand. Hi, we're not from the city. We're not here to check up on you. We just want to help. Hank frowned. Well, will you come back next week? Marcus squinted and answered, absolutely. Second stop was the barber. Old Polaroids on the walls, each one showing someone smiling after a fresh haircut. Marcus looked at the barber's hands, calloused, patient, gentle. Would you let us support you? He asked. The barber smiled. You bring the coffee, I'll bring the scissors. Driving home that night, Marcus stared out the minivan window. The streets were dark and cold, but there was something burning inside him, a small but stubborn hope. Luna's voice echoed in his ears. Dad, you'll fix things again someday, right? Yes, but this time, not engines. People. The night was long, and the wind was fierce. When Marcus got home, Luna was already asleep. He found her bundled up in her blanket, inside the little story tent she'd made at the head of her bed. He knelt down next to her and gently stroked her hair. For a moment, it felt like all he had to worry about was the peace on that small head, not the weight of the whole city. But by the next morning, reality would hit him like a slap in the face. Early in the morning, his phone buzzed. The message from Trina was clear. Urgent. Our budget has been cut by 40%. Details in your email. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. After just a few hours of peace, this news almost put out the spark inside him. He sat down at his computer and opened the email. His face fell as he read it. The funding cut was the result of a sudden decision from headquarters. The explanation was short and cold. Insufficient documentation, unauthorized purchases, and out-of-budget volunteer activities. In other words, exactly the things Marcus was proud of doing. By midday, when the whole team met again, the tension in the room was obvious. Luis looked pale, Zane was gnawing on the edge of the table, and Trina was hugging her arms tight, staring at the wall. Marcus stood up and spoke directly. We lost 40%. No explanation, no chance to defend ourselves. Everything wiped out in one go. No one said a word. Luis muttered. So what do we do now? No coats, no blankets. Nothing left. Trina shook her head. What do we tell people? Sorry, we couldn't keep you warm, but we meant well. Marcus quietly walked to the whiteboard, and underneath the word trust he'd written before, he added another word in red. Truth. People believed in us because we were honest. We approached them as people, not as a system. So we'll do the same thing now. We'll tell the truth. Zane got up from his chair. So we just go out there and say, the help is gone, but we're still here. Marcus nodded. Yes, because sometimes the biggest help is just not running away. Another silence. Then Trina put on her coat. Then let's go together. First stop was Hank's food truck. In the morning steam mixed with the smell of soup, Marcus told Hank everything. The budget cut, possible distribution issues, even the uncertainty. Hank just kept stirring his ladle, not blinking. That's exactly why I trusted you in the first place, he said. Not for the blankets, for your honesty. Next, they went to Darren the barber's shop. Marcus explained again. Darren answered without even putting down his scissors. How much is a haircut, he said. But the right one at the right time. That can save a life. I'm staying right here. You do the same. At that moment, something rose up inside Marcus. He couldn't name it, but it made him stand tall. It was resilience, hope, and maybe a kind of dignified anger. When they got back to the office, Louise said. We could put out a volunteer call on social media. Trina had already drafted a post. No cameras, low budget. But we're still here. Join us. Within 2 hours, 50 volunteers had messaged. One wrote, I knit scarves. I'm slow, but I never stop. That night, after putting Luna to bed, Marcus went back to the kitchen. He stood at the window with a cup of tea in his hand and looked outside. It had started to rain, just like that night. The night he gave Clara his coat. That was when he realized this wasn't just a charity project. This was a journey that helped a man who'd lost his way find it again. The next morning, Marcus's phone started ringing before he was even fully awake. There was a tone in Trina's voice he wasn't used to: sharp, fast, and anxious. You need to get to the center right now. Something happened. Something bad. Marcus left his coffee half finished, kissed Luna on the cheeks, and dropped her off at the neighbor's, then rushed into the building. As soon as he stepped into the hallway, it looked like a storm had blown through. Open files scattered on the floor, unfinished paperwork on the desk, ringing phones, and tense faces everywhere. Luis came up with a piece of paper in his hand, his voice shaking. Someone filed an official complaint about the program. There's an internal audit. All activities have been stopped. Marcus's face went pale. What complaint? Trina handed him the paper. The headline was clear: Winter Aid Initiative, financial mismanagement, unauthorized spending, improper distribution. His face froze. This is a lie. Everything was documented. All of it was on record. Luis lowered his head. The complaint is anonymous, but the document code comes from Kyle's system. Kyle, the tech specialist who never believed in Marcus from day one, who always saw him as the wrong person for the office. In a blink, he'd reduced all their work to a single report. Trina gritted her teeth. The complaint's gone up the chain. HR and legal have frozen the whole operation. Nothing can leave the building. Volunteers are on hold. No distribution. Zero. Marcus closed his eyes. For a moment, there was only a deep, dark void. Then a fire flared up inside him, anger not for himself, but for dozens of others. This wasn't just his reputation. This was Hank's soup, Darren's haircuts, the patience of the elderly woman knitting that scarf, the hope in Luna's eyes. That same day, Marcus was standing alone in the glass-walled conference room of the law office. Across from him were 3 people, one dozing off, one taking cold notes, and one consultant staring straight into his eyes. The questions came one after another. Why did you submit the invoice without approval? Weren't the volunteers' background checked? Didn't you get a signed form during distribution? Marcus answered honestly. We didn't get the heaters from an approved vendor because they were 50% more expensive. When a woman's baby was freezing, I didn't want to make her sign a form. I didn't even have a pen. All I had was a blanket. There was a brief silence. One of the consultants took off his glasses. Mr. Bennett, we understand your intentions, but this isn't policy. Marcus leaned forward on the table. His gaze was unwavering, then changed the policy. Before anyone could answer, he left the room. He stepped into the elevator, his footsteps echoing behind him. But instead of pressing a floor number, he headed for the roof. That was Marcus's escape spot. Ever since his first week, he'd stand there, watching the city, taking refuge in the silence above it all. He did the same now. He put his hands in his pockets and looked up at the sky. Is that it? He wondered. I gave away a coat, saved a life, and it all ends with a report? The door opened behind him. Footsteps approached, carried by the wind. Then a familiar voice. I should have been there. It was Clara. Her eyes were full but steady. Marcus turned to look at her. You didn't do this on purpose. But while you were there, they weren't. Clara stepped closer. I'm going to talk to the board. This won't end like this. Marcus gave her a tired smile. If you fight, you'll save more than just me. You'll save the whole project. Clara took a deep breath. Can I ask you something? Her eyes sparkled. Did you ever regret giving away that coat? Marcus shook his head. I've thought about it for years. I was never upset it didn't come back. Because maybe it was never supposed to. They went downstairs together. The determination on Clara's face made Marcus's burden feel a little lighter. That night, while telling Luna a bedtime story, he didn't mention work even once. He just said, sometimes people do good things without thinking, and sometimes that one act starts something huge years later. The morning began with an unexpected silence. There were no footsteps in the office halls, no ringing phones. It was as if everyone was holding their breath. But in the boardroom, The silence was different, tense, judging, evaluating. For the first time in her life, Clara Weiss hadn't prepared a speech. She had no notes in her hand. She just had the story of a coat, and she was standing in the center of the room, ready to tell it. In front of her sat the most powerful people in the company, and off to the side was Kyle, still wearing that mask of fake indifference. Clara lifted her head and began to speak. We're not here today to talk about the accusations against Marcus Bennett, but to talk about the spirit this company was founded on. Then she told the story of the coat, of a rainy night, when a young woman had reached a point where she couldn't feel anything anymore. And a man handed her his coat without saying a word or asking who she was. He didn't even ask my name, Clara said. He just told me, don't bring it back. One day, give it to someone else. The conference room fell into silence. Then Clara reached into a box and pulled out that coat. It was old, worn, but still standing strong. I never forgot that day. And this company was built on the foundation of that coat. If you punish Marcus today, you're not just punishing an employee, you're punishing the heart of this company. An older board member sitting in the corner took off his glasses. My son died out in the cold, he said. If someone had given him a coat in time, maybe he'd still be alive. The other members started nodding one by one. The finance director spoke up. We'll review all protocols. For aid projects, we'll authorize emergency spending. And we're clearing all charges against Marcus. Kyle tried to object, but nobody listened. Then Clara spoke one last time. And I'd like to propose a new position. Director of Community Engagement. Permanent. Independent. And I already have my first candidate. The door opened, and Marcus walked in. He was wearing his old flannel shirt, his eyes wide with surprise. He stopped when he saw everyone looking at him. Clara smiled. Mr. Bennett, welcome to the board. For a moment, Marcus felt inadequate. But then Luna's voice echoed in his mind. Dad, you fix people. And that's exactly what he would keep doing. It was winter. The community center was now more than just a dream. There were photos on the walls, volunteers, longtime donors, new hopes. Trina had started a support program for kids. Luis was leading volunteer training. Zane was mentoring the youth. And Marcus was always the first to arrive and the last to leave. But the most special day came. On the morning of the first snowfall, Luna looked out the window and shouted with excitement, Dad, it's snowing. Marcus put on his glasses, wrapped his daughter's scarf around his neck, and they went outside together. They sat on a bench among the falling snowflakes, just like the night Clara had once sat under that old street lamp. A new plaque had been mounted on the bench. An act of kindness that started with an anonymous coat has touched hundreds of lives. Don't bring it back. One day, give it to someone else. Luna handed Marcus the package in her lap. Inside was his favorite coat. It's not mine anymore, Luna said. It should go to someone else. Marcus smiled. His face was wet from the snow and his eyes from emotion. Just in time, he said, because right now, someone out there might be waiting for this very coat. And maybe, somewhere, under a street lamp, someone really was still waiting to be seen.